What are you filming?
You're gonna go red point that 11 deep?
Yeah, he is.
Oh boy.
You got it, man.
He is. He's good.
Come on, man. You got it, Matt. Good. Come on, Matt.
Take.
I was out at Giant City Park here in Carbondale with a couple buddies, and we were messing around on this big cliff called the Macanda Bluff at Shelter 1, and we were just messing around and climbing around on it, and I ended up finding a little way to climb up the side of it. It was probably like 80 to 100 feet, and it wasn't like that difficult, but it's difficult enough where doing it without a rope is pretty dangerous. And I got about halfway up, and my shoes were just giving me trouble. So I took my shoes off and I tossed them down to my friends down below me. And then I finished climbing the route. And when I got up to the top, there was a guy sitting there reading a book. And he said, hey. And I said, hey. He said, well, so you're climbing? I'm like, well, I mean, kind of. You know, I just came up that little thing over there. He said, where are your shoes? And I told him I had some trouble, so I tossed them down to my friends. And he said, man, you're perfect. You're just what we're looking for.
I got into climbing because, well, I was basically working full-time and then going to school like every night, and I did nothing socially, pretty much. I ran into Matt Jeffers one time, and we were talking, and he was like, so what have you been up to, man? And I was like, you know, Matt, I've been up to absolutely nothing. And so he got me to come out to the silo, and I climbed a couple times, and I was hooked.
My mother signed me up for an introduction to rock climbing course back in the day, probably freshman year of high school, so about 8 years ago. From then on, I just took well to it and I stuck with it.
I actually got into climbing through Nate Kingery. I was in marching band with him here my freshman year, and somehow we got to talking about different things that we like to do outdoors, and he said something about rock climbing, and I was like, oh, I've done that a couple of times. I was like, yeah, that'd be cool to get into, and he's like, hey, you should come to the club meeting with me, because Nate was in the rock climbing club, and so I was like, okay, I'll check it out, and so I went and kept going, and here I am.
Yeah, when I was 7 years old, my best buddy and I, who lived next door, thought it'd be a great idea to be a mountaineer for Halloween. So we went down to the Army-Navy store and picked up a harness and a rope and, you know, adorned ourselves as mountaineers. And then from there just kind of started using the gear, playing in trees. Bought one sling, one carabiner, one rope, went out to the local rock and just kind of made up climbing. And by when we were about 8 years old or 9 years old, my dad thought it'd be a good idea for us to get some lessons.
I guess I started when I was 12. I learned how to belay when I was 12. I think I top roped for, oh geez, probably 3-4 years maybe. I don't remember when I learned how to lead climb. Maybe I was 14 or 15. But I really took my time. I never took climbing that seriously when I was younger. Truth be told, I really wasn't that into it until high school, late high school. And then I realized, you know, I think I prefer climbing to baseball or maybe not hockey, but definitely to baseball.
I guess it would be, you know, I owe it all to my ex-wife, Kim. She was the one that, you know, I was really bored in the suburbs of Chicago, and she was like, I really wanted to go climbing, and she said, we should go to one of those indoor places. And I was like, okay. And she's like, call them right now. So we did. And so I would say that's the first milestone, was taking that step, you know, which, you know, she was definitely the catalyst for. Then I would say it was buying shoes, buying a rack, walking around Estes Park, walking around Devil's Lake, placing gear, reading books. I did not know another climber. Like I had to train myself via books, from How to Rock Climb with Dwayne Raleigh, you know, and John Long's climbing books, like Advanced Knots and whatever, anchors. And then, moving down here and, starting to climb and lead climb and trad climb and sport climb and boulder.
And I would say a milestone would be Shorty the Pimp. Long time ago. Eventually, that route finally went. I think I worked on it for probably 7 or 8 months. Consistently, every time I go to Jackson, I would try it. And then after a while, I was just getting fed up with it, so I took a little time off. And then one weekend, I tried it again, and I tried a different foot placement. I raised my foot up a little bit higher, and I just reached through the hardest move of the route. And there I stood, hung because I was on the wall, salty because I hadn't figured that out before. But I finally, after that, I learned that new move, and I just walked up to the top, no problem.
Grades are always definitely memorable landmarks.
Definitely doing your first 5'10" and your first 5'11", your first 5'12", and your first 5'13", and I haven't done 5'14", but someday maybe.
5'12" was special because that was, something that I would have never dreamed of doing when I did it.
I climbed 5 fun, and to get there I had to climb through 5 plastic, 5 chaussee, 5 soft that fell off all the time, 5 scary, 5 manky. A lot of bad 5s got me to 5 fun. Our 5 plastic was the gym that we climbed in, which was just so uninspiring. And 5 chaussee was our expedition to Carpenter Park in Springfield to climb a 20-foot sandstone cliff that we'd heard about right off the river. And we ended up just breaking holds off of it the entire day and never actually reaching the top, just falling to the ground, falling onto rock with holds in our hands. And, I climbed a lot of scary things, trying to learn how to climb and get the technique of it down before I got to where I am now.
I lived in Yosemite for 4 seasons and got to climb all the things I ever saw in the magazines and stuff. Obviously not all, but you know what I mean. Like, I got to climb on the cathedrals in El Cap and Half Dome and up in Tuolumne and Cathedral Peak, and things that I'd always seen and just romanticized, and then got there and they were bigger, better, and badder than I ever thought they would be from the pictures.
Did a lot of competitions when I was in middle school and early high school. I went to the Nationals in Portland, Oregon when I was in 8th grade. So that was actually going to be a big milestone. I suppose it was more of a milestone in my life. I ended up twisting my knee and tearing a ligament and some cartilage in my knee right before the competition, just hours before the competition. So that threw me out of contention. Was on crutches for about 2 months and couldn't climb for 9 months. So that was a pretty big shocker in my life. It really kind of shattered my ideas of what I was doing with my life.